Hello and welcome back to the third Arduino video in this series. Today we're going to be looking at some of the control structures. So I'll leave the link to this part here in the description, but you can also just come to the Arduino website, hover over learning and click on reference. There's also some tutorials that might be useful if you want to look at them. So again, I'm making this tutorial. The point of this tutorial is to help people who don't have much understanding of the coding part. So I'm going to look at these control structures because they're almost the most important, apart from, of course, these built-in functions into Arduino. But we've already been using these. So anyway, I'm going to start with the while loop because I think that's the easiest to understand, and that's what the void loop is. So the void loop, this function here, if you will, or this loop, all it's doing is it's equivalent to saying, in terms of a while loop, it's the same as saying while one. And what this basically means is while one, do the stuff inside the curly brackets. So it will just continue forever. Or it's the same as saying while true, and naturally it is just true. So while true, do this. By the way, if you weren't sure, Arduino is the sketches that you write actually written in the C programming languages. Essentially, it's very similar. And which means you always have to define variables and you have to declare them like this. So an integer would be int variable, for example, which is a terrible name, but you could say equals 10, and you can say int x equals 0. So there you go, we've defined two variables, or you could do float, and float is a data type, and with that you can just say float y equals 12.45. Anyway, so that's what float is. It just means decimal point. Has decimal points. Another really important thing that you probably already noticed is that you always need a semicolon at the end of each statement, just to say that it's the next line. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to put in a while loop in here, and in the round brackets is where you compare something, or you compare something that you want to be true. And then don't forget the curly brackets, they always need to close each other. So currently this curly bracket closes that one, and then that one closes this one. It just does it automatically in the order. So everything inside here now is in the while loop, and the while loop itself is inside the void loop, if you're with me. Okay, so inside the while loop, now we could do, say, while one. And that would be just the same as having a void loop as before, and that would be pointless. But what we could do, for example, is we could say while x is less than a variable, which it currently is because variable equals 10 and x currently equals 0, we could make a statement along the lines of x equals x plus 1, which means each time we go through this loop, x will equal x plus 1. And in this case, it will start off as 0, then it will become 1. When it goes through the next time, it will be 1 equals 1 plus 1, and it will equal 2, and so on. A shorthand way of writing this is just to do plus equals 1, and don't forget the semicolon at the end. So this gives us 10. I'm actually going to change this to 5 or 4 even, so we can see it. Let's upload the sketch to our Arduino board, and then you'll be able to see that it cuts out after the third one, or whatever. And you have 1, 2, 3, and there you go, it's cut out, because once it has to be less than, we haven't put less than or equal to. If we had done, it would have done it one more time. So, and that looks like this, by the way, less than or equal to, and the same way you can have greater than, equal to. Now if you want, yeah, so that's fine. So that's the while statement, and that's the while loop, and that's really useful. So what another thing we could do is we could do now statement, but I'm going to leave that for the for loop. So that's it really for the while loop. It's really simple, and it just kind of says do this until that. So we're going to leave those curly brackets there and we're just going to change this now to a for loop, which is the other one, and those are the two loops we'll be covering this one. No, actually, let's do if statement instead. Because the for, I've realized with the for, I'll show it in the next video probably, but the for loop makes itself a bit redundant inside the for loop because it defines x as, it's hard to, I'll explain it in the next video. So we won't do for loop right now. Just ignore that. So the if statement, what you could do is, as before, we're gonna have the round brackets here, and we could say if variable is equals x above here, then execute this, and it will just execute it once. Well, it will continue to execute it if it was equal, because it's inside the void loop, and we just keep comparing it. If we get rid of this, if variable equals x, then I want to do this, and we'll see in a moment. Upload. So there you go, it should now keep flashing on and off. And that's just the if statement. We're just saying if variable, that's wrong by the way, ignore that. So when you're comparing two things, you use double equal sign. When you're assigning something, then you use one equal sign. So here we've assigned something. This is just now working because it's inside the loop, but we just want to assign, this is how you compare something. So if variable double equal sign equals x, then we want that to happen. Of course, anyway, we know that works. Sorry for that mistake. But we could do something else, for example. So if we now did 3, it won't execute now because variable does not equal 3. So let's upload that and just test it. So there you go, it's off now because variable does not equal x. They have different values. But here we can use now the else statement. So the else just means just do this instead. Basically, it says if this isn't true and whatever else isn't true, just do this in any case. So else, we just want to copy this line really, we just want it to be high. So what we're doing now, we're saying if variable equals x, then turn on and off, then on and off. Else, if it's anything else, then just keep it high. So what will happen now is yes, we need to close this off first. So that's that function, and then we can have our else function. So we need to get rid of one of these now. There you go. So that will work now. So that's how you use the if. So let's upload that, and hopefully it will just be on. There you go. So that's how that statement works. And what we can do now is we can just change this back to 4 just to demonstrate, and it will actually be flashing now this time because the statement will be true and it won't reach the else statement. So it reaches this statement first and says, well, that is true. So now we've got a flashing LED light. Anyway, that's the end of this tutorial. I hope that was moderately useful. Thank you for watching, and see you back in the next video.